Good morning for everyone who is in attendance and those who are listening via streaming or on some other format these days. We want to welcome you to a press conference that we're doing this morning and conducting. We have an incredible group of people here that have joined with us. And this morning, we have joined together really because we want to make sure that we are a unified voice and a collective voice to address some of the issues that are currently happening around our country and in our culture. Joined here this morning is Center for Urban Renewal and Cure in Education, Center for Urban Renewal and Education, Cure, as well as Black Conservative Federation and several other people from different states that we will mention in just a moment. And we are very privileged to have them with us here this moment. But one of the things that we have said in our press release over and over again, that we want to call for censure for one of the representatives here, as well as talking about the current SCOTUS pick and really civility in our current culture. So this morning, without further ado, I'd like to move forward with this. And one of the things I want to mention as we are moving forward as well is that several of the people here are with our National Cure Clergy Network, which is a network of over 800 clergy and represents about 2 million plus people in our country and our culture, especially within urban communities. So it is a broad group of people that have representative voices here this morning. First and foremost, who I'd like to bring to the podium is Bishop Aubrey Shines. Bishop Aubrey Shines is not only senior pastor of Glory to Glory Ministries, but he's also a writer with Real Clear Politics, as well as Breitbart Times and others. He's outspoken, and he is consistently a sought-after voice on many issues. And so Bishop Aubrey Shines is from Florida, and he's also a part of our Cure Clergy Network. So Bishop Shines.
Thank you. I'm Bishop Aubrey Shines from Tampa, Florida, and what a pleasure it is to stand before you. We're very concerned about this pollution of divisiveness that we are hearing across this country, unfortunately from the Democratic Party, especially from Maxine Waters. When we continue to hear this type of venom that's being spewed as she is doing so by asking those who follow her, those that are part of her party, to make sure that individuals like myself, that we are accosted, not just a cabinet, but that we're accosted wherever we are. She said, and I quote, anywhere, anytime. That means in supermarkets, in restaurants, wherever those of us who have supported this current president find ourselves, we're being asked, or she's rather is asking those that follow her to make sure that they make sure that we are harassed in some sort of form. This is unacceptable. We have not seen this type of deluge, at least for the last several decades. And these type of issues are issues that blacks and whites across this country fought together to make sure that we would never, ever see again. Yet she is spewing this type of venom over and over. And unfortunately, her tentacles have reached as far as the mainstream media. We are now also being called dogs, trained dogs by those that are in the mainstream media, simply because we do not adhere to groupthink. We're asking Paul Ryan, the majority leader, to make sure that he censures her. This is unacceptable. This type of rhetoric is something that is just unacceptable in America. This type of racial divisiveness is something that is helping destroy America as we know it. And when we see the various forms that are being lived out, whether it's Sarah Huckabee that is being asked to leave out of restaurants, and we know of others that are unfortunately not being reported by the news media, where men and women that are wearing, for instance, Make America Great Again hats, they're being asked to leave Ubers and leave taxis simply because we have a different point of view. This type of intolerance is something that we will not tolerate. And again, we are asking Paul Ryan to step up exact to his job and to make sure that Maxine Waters feel the very brunt of her inactions. Thank you. Again, I am Bishop Aubrey Shines from Tampa, Florida.
Thank you, Bishop Shines. Well spoken. The next person we have in front of us is a great young man, Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is the president and founder of the Black Conservative Federation. and he represents many millennials with this real thought process. And the one thing I want to be clear, when you hear Deontay Johnson, it's not just Deontay. Deontay has a cadre of young people that are around him that have the same thought process around our country, and different ideologies need to have their own voices.
Thank you, Minister Derek. This press conference is very important because we are entering into a time in America where we have cabinet members who doesn't feel safe. We have members of the administration who doesn't feel safe. But in general, we have Republicans as a whole who doesn't feel safe. And to me, this is a reverse in time. We are discriminating not based upon race anymore, but based upon political preference. And to Maxine Waters, it's very shameful. It's shameful for someone who has experienced segregation to turn around and represent it and turn around and reverse it to political party. Yesterday, I talked with a few black conservatives who are interning here on the Hill, and they mentioned how they were kicked out of an Uber because they had MAGA hats on. And the driver said, "Oh, I can't drive you guys because I don't support Trump. I don't support the president. I don't support what you guys are wearing, so I can't do that." This is the effect of Maxine Waters. This is the effect of the Congressional Black Caucus members who haven't called her out. This is the effect of Paul Ryan, who hasn't processed the censorship. And this is the effect of the Democrat Party as a whole, who hasn't said, "Maxine Waters, you can't say that. You shouldn't say that." And this is the effects of the media, who has continued to display the recklessness of our congressmen. I'm standing here today to say that this has to stop. And the people behind me are saying that this has to stop. And the entire black conservative movement is saying that this has to stop. We must stop, and she must be stopped. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, Deontay. Appreciate that. Next we'll have with us is Bishop David Ritchie. Bishop David Ritchie is a wise man from the great state of Alabama. And we know as the Supreme Court picks are nearing nomination, Bishop Ritchie has an incredible voice in that state. But we'd like to welcome him. He is the senior pastor of the Gulf Coast Christian Center, as well as the presiding bishop of Operation Mobile, if I want to make sure I have that correctly, Operation Mobile International Churches.
Thanks a lot, Pastor Derek.
Yes, sir.
I also want to echo the sentiments of the previous speakers, but I want to address both of the topics that we're talking about today. A lot of our young people in our group, they use this word, and when I first heard it, they used the word crazy. They said, "This is crazy, this is crazy." And so now I'm saying it, this is crazy. But what's happening to our nation is crazy. I travel around the world. I oversee churches in Nigeria and Cuba and other nations. And the difference in our nation and other nations is the civility that we have. When we have missionaries that come to our nation, one of the things that I've heard them say is that everything works here. Everything works.
Wow.
They're surprised that everything works, when the traffic lights and everything. Our legislature is supposed to work. Our checks and balances are supposed to work. We go to the voting booths and we vote for people, and the one that is elected is the one that we say we want to lead, and that's it. And then the next time someone else comes in, and we're looking at now that people are saying we don't want that person because of, and we're turning into to other nations where we're saying, now let's start fighting. Let's start arguing. Let's start taking it to the streets. Let's no longer make things work. Let's begin to fight. Let's tear each other apart. The problem with Maxine Waters is not Maxine Waters because she learned that behavior. So I don't really have a problem with her. I have a problem with the people that are not saying they have a problem with her. That's the problem. She learned that behavior because people did it to her. So now she's doing it to others. But Why isn't anyone jumping up and down and saying, you can't do that? We have order in the United States. You can't do that to people. The next election, we'll elect someone else maybe. But right now, sit down, be quiet, and do what you're told. That's the way it is. In Alabama recently, we had a real divisive election, and I want to address that just for a moment. We now have a senator. I want to address my senator from Alabama, Senator Doug Jones. And sir, if you perhaps would listen to this, I would ask you that this is a time that you can really bring our state together by choosing this awesome pick that's been chosen for the next Supreme Court justice. As I looked at his credentials, I say, wow, this guy has really been chosen to be, he has actually been made to be a Supreme Court justice. All of his credentials says that he is he didn't say I'm a Republican when he made choices. He didn't say I'm a Democrat when he made choices. He looked at the law and he made decisions. And that's what I saw that he did, the way he made his decisions. And I said that he would make the best Supreme Court justice that we've ever seen almost. And so, Doug Jones, sir, this would be an excellent opportunity for you as a Democrat to come up behind him and say yes and amen and unify the great state of Alabama. Would you do that, sir? Thank you so much for listening.
Wow. Great, wise words from Bishop Ritchie. That is phenomenal perspective, and we appreciate those words, Bishop Ritchie. The next person we have, and he goes right in line, is Jonathan Alexander, who is an attorney here in this area, but he's also the Director of Public Policy for Liberty Counsel, and Jonathan does great work, and so we welcome Jonathan's voice.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Jonathan.
We address today this call and need for civility and the free expression of ideology. We address, in this context, in particular, statements from Congressman Maxine Waters that she has called for the harassment and the persecution of members of the Trump administration. You know, this is a dangerous and an unhinged, really, call. And it signals to liberal activists that violence is a preferred way to demonstrate disagreement. Now, this Congresswoman acts really as a chimney for the real fire of a left-wing anarchy that's attempting to burn the very structures and foundations of our constitutional republic. And in doing so, it shows that there is no longer any pride in the history of our traditions and no credible forecasting for the future growth of this nation. It also demonstrates that this resistance is not progressing at all, but is rather in a standstill, hunched over in a dark corner of bitterness, self-loathing, and now dangerous retaliation. You know, this attitude is sort of like an addiction to chaos. And it can only be met, it can only be remedied with civility, with right standing, people of good moral conscience calling on a moral society to correct this political illness. Harassment and persecution, as mentioned, may work in other communist, totalitarian, or oppressive regimes. It may work well over there, but here we've committed ourselves to a higher standard of public discourse, where it's the ballot and not bullies that speak for the American public, where it is voting and not violence that shapes the direction of our country, where it is discourse and not delinquency that expresses our agreement or our disagreement on an issue. That every man and woman have a right to speak and write and print his or her opinions on any subject whatsoever without prior restraint, so long as they do not injure any other person in their right, person, property, or their reputation. Make no mistake, this attempt at injury, this hostility, is a direct pushback against the success of conservative policies shaping government action at various levels. You know, in many ways, this administration has been the strongest administration on record, the strongest on record as it comes to protecting the sanctity of life, the strongest on record as they have fought to limit government involvement and intrusion in our lives. When issues like religious liberty have risen to the forefront of our political debate, this administration has been 100% accurate in all of their interventions and contributions to this cherished right, including the appointment of judges and justices to our judicial benches who defend this right. And in this context, President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, could shape the American legal landscape for decades. As the president noted in his introductory message, Kavanaugh has impeccable academic credentials, expansive professional experience. He is truly a judge's judge. You think about the credentials of this man. Most recently, he has served for 12 years on the bench of the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. He's written over 300 judicial opinions, and the Supreme Court has endorsed his opinions more than a dozen times. His 100 most cited opinions have been used by over 210 other judges, and in his own words, Judge Kavanaugh said that his judicial philosophy, his straightforward approach, is that a judge must be independent and must interpret the law and not make it. Judge Kavanaugh has already committed to interpreting the original text of the Constitution, and he has a stellar career that proves that. He's been the attorney in the Office of the Solicitor General. He's clerked for Justice Anthony Kennedy on the United States Supreme Court. He was associate counsel in the Office of Independent Counsel. He was the associate counsel and then senior associate counsel to the president. He was assistant to the president and staff secretary to the president. He's argued cases before the Supreme Court and other appellate courts. He has taught full-term courses at Harvard Law School, at Yale Law School, at Georgetown University Law Center, and has published articles in all 3 of these schools' journals and in 6 other journals. The White House has said in a statement that Judge Kavanaugh is the best of the best, a man who builds consensus and decides cases based on the law and not his personal preferences. Is this what the left is angry about? Is this what the left convulses over? Is this what you are seeking to stop? We're here to remind you that you may have the right to disagree. Disagree if you may, but civil society's adherence to the principles of the Constitution won't be stopped. We know this truth, and so we'll continue to speak it. We know our hope, and so we'll continue to tell it. We know our goal, and we will reach it. And we will not be silenced. And right now, we have the chance to be heard on this vitally important issue with the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. President Trump has chosen a man who will be a powerful voice for the Constitution and the founders' vision of a free constitutional government. We have this chance to make our voice heard. And in doing so, we will be upholding the ideals of freedom, this ideal of free speech, this ideal that all people should be able to engage with each other in a reasoned discussion of serious issues and to seek a common understanding. This is what we are championing, and so we will stand up, we will speak out, and we will encourage others and all to do the same. For this is what our great civil society deserves. Nothing lower and nothing less.
Wow. Thank you, Jonathan. That was, in case you did not understand who the judge was, you should have gotten a great educational lesson at this point about the current Supreme Court nominee. At this time, we're going to ask Jams Goul, which is an incredible voice as well. He has been outspoken in a couple of different avenues, especially in the North Carolina region. He's from North Carolina. He is a part of the Victory Christian Center, and where his that group and that church is a part of our National Cure Clergy Network, and we really appreciate Jams coming from North Carolina to share as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Regarding any federal judge, it is important they understand what the Constitution does not say and respect that. This is the primary issue with liberals. They believe our Constitution is outdated because of what it does not say. President Trump has selected someone who will interpret the Constitution as it was written and for what it means. When liberals object to this, it confirms their disdain for the Constitution. Liberal Justice Ginsburg was consulting Egypt on establishing a constitution, and she advised that she would not look to the U.S. Constitution, but rather, to paraphrase, to modern constitutions, those which just so happen to have progressive policies built into them. I contend that our Constitution is never outdated, because rather than being hundreds of pages filled with policy like these modern constitutions are, our founders put together a few simple pages dealing with human nature. Now, human nature has no expiration date. So neither does our Constitution. And although the Constitution was not perfect, they left a means for correcting imperfections, some of which have already been corrected, allowing me to stand before you today. By design, in order to ensure lasting liberty and freedom, equally important to what is in the Constitution is what is not in the Constitution. Selecting a judge who understands this is therefore of utmost importance. And our president has just done that. Along the lines of lasting liberty and freedom, equally, we must address our liberty to disagree. We have to protect that liberty. And that liberty is under attack. Many people accept that Maxine Waters is the current unchallenged face of the Democratic Party, which means she represents roughly half of the United States. Now, remaining positive, I encourage her to respect our liberty and issue a retraction of her call to followers to harass the Trump cabinet. As we all know and have already seen, many of our less educated citizens don't know the difference between cabinet members, White House staff, and congressmen. And some of this behavior is even being manifested towards citizens who support the president, even to the point of assault. This never-before-seen behavior, particularly pushed by a member of Congress, of all people, needs to end before it escalates to the type of violence being called for. For example, in Splinter magazine on June 25th, where the writer calls for more violence and suggests 1970s-style terrorist bombings. And Michael Moore, also on Bill Maher's show, whose comments could be paraphrased into a call for civil war. Civil war. All after, and apparently suggested, encouraged, not just by any liberal person, but by a U.S. Congresswoman who has become the face, maybe even the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. So please, Ms. Waters, reverse, retract, and call for an end to this activity now. Thank you.
Wow, great words. Appreciate that, Johns. Incredible. Our last but not least is Star Parker, who is the president and founder of CURE, Center for Urban Renewal and Education. And we invite Star.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Derek McCoy, the Executive Vice President of CURE, for running CURE, for heeding the call of Deontay Johnson, the founder and president of the Black Conservative Federation, to convene this press conference today. And I also want to thank the bishops who at the last minute decided that, yes, we will set aside our schedules to come and support CURE and Deontay in this effort to speak to the nation and to the world that Maxine Waters is not the reflection and face of all Black America. I appreciate you and the media allowing us this opportunity. The left of our society are extremely angry right now and have become unhinged upon the election of President Donald Trump. Over the last year and a half, tensions have escalated even within families to where they're not even able to have discussions, similar to what we saw right before our Civil War. And social media fuels opportunity to organize and to intimidate fellow Americans with elevated and vile threats. The call on social media after the Red Hen incident against Press Secretary Sarah Sanders to, instead of kicking them out, to piss in their food. This is not only vulgar, it is absolutely unacceptable, and it needs to be addressed by both the FDA and the National Restaurant Association. The recent attacks against Trump supporters are absolutely unacceptable in a free society. And censoring Congresswoman Maxine Waters for her recent comments to take away the constitutional rights of those who do not agree with the left will send a very clear message that in order to maintain a civil society, both violence and vileness must be stopped, and it must stop immediately. Congresswoman Maxine Waters has violated the sacred trust we each have to each other as Americans to have each of our rights stopped at the other's nose. Her call to extremism based on where another American citizen works and who they associate with must be sternly addressed by Speaker Paul Ryan. An apology is not enough, nor does she offer one after being asked by House Speaker. As we move into 2 months of intense debate over the next SCOTUS nomination, the censoring of Maxine Waters becomes of extreme urgency. So we compel Speaker Paul Ryan to heed the call of many in the Freedom Caucus today, his colleagues, and censor Maxine Waters today. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you've heard several different well thought out comments that bring wisdom and civility to this debate in our current society, as well as very prudent perspectives on the current Supreme Court nomination. I think many of these folks will be readily available for questions and answers if you'd like to have them. And at this time, it absolutely concludes our press time, but we want to make sure you understand that we are calling for real civility in this debate and a new course for America to move forward. I like what Bishop Ritchie says very clearly, that we have to be America and the United States of America where things work. Yeah, if you have any media questions, we would love to answer those at this time if anybody's here. That was the next thing. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Derek, Maxine Waters said God is on her side. How would you respond to that?
I've been taught well to make sure that I defer to the higher up bishops, so we have a couple of them here. I'm going to pass that question along.
Well, I'm not sure what God Maxine Waters is referencing, so maybe if she would have given a little clarity to which God she was referencing. If she's referencing the God of a Judeo-Christian ethic, Maxine Waters could never have been so wrong. Maybe a basic course in systematic theology perhaps would have helped her. Maybe just a basic understanding in someone's basic Bible school would have helped. When we hear Maxine Waters really kind of amplify the voice of individuals that we have not heard for in decades, just imagine for a moment, she supports individuals and have not denounced individuals that have actually asked pedophiles to attack Barron Trump. Imagine for just a moment had we heard that type of outrage from an individual asking, molesters to take the bodies of the prior president, Barack Hussein Obama, and molest his daughters. What would we have heard in this nation? Would we have heard from her God at that point? So Maxine Waters' God, I'm not sure which God. I don't mean that to be obtuse or in any kind of way disrespect. I just have no idea what her core faith belief system really is. But if she's referencing the God of Scripture, she's never been so wrong before.
Let me add, in addition to her bringing God into this, we can just look in recent history at the language of the civil rights movement and Jim Crow. And some of what we're appealing for today, President John Kennedy said then that we must have civility, but we must have openness in our free society, that people can be mobile. And the fact that most people that are now either associated with this administration and or that are in media to support this administration are not safe in their personal space, that their children and their grandchildren are now put at at risk simply because of the choices they've made to affiliate with half of the country that agrees with the momentum, the agenda, and the accomplishments of President Donald Trump, that now we are at risk, is unacceptable in this free and open society. So Maxine Waters must be censured. I don't care which God she's decided that she wants to hear from. This society is open and free, and you cannot have a sitting member in the United States Congress that knows the history of Jim Crow and slavery sitting here and indicting half of the country into this type of threat simply because we do not agree with her.
Good point. Great point. Sure.
Romans chapter 15, verse 33. Now the God of peace be with you all. Amen. So, I know that I have seen Ms. Waters in a press conference that was, she did not know was being recorded, where she was in support of Sharia law in the United States. So, quite possibly, she's speaking of a different God than the God of the Bible. So, I'll leave it at that. But based on the God of the Bible, God is a God of peace, according to New Testament doctrine. And what she's encouraging absolutely has nothing to do with peace.
Thank you. I think that clears up that question. Any other questions? All right. Well, we want to thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. And I'm sure you'll be able to catch some of this in viral format shortly. Have a great day. Thank you all for coming and being with us.